evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mohit Khattar, and we are here to discuss, me and the entire panel, who I will shortly ask to introduce themselves. We are basically here to discuss how can we together grow the health foods market in India. The health foods market, as you know, is a much smaller percentage of the overall packaged and unpackaged foods market in India. Uh, as per some of the recent estimates that one has seen, it contributes only to about 7 to 8% of the overall packaged foods in India currently, and it's growing approximately at the same pace as the rest of the foods market. Now, what is it that we can do together as an industry, as retailers, as manufacturers, as health experts, as nutritionists, as dietitians? What is it that we can do together to grow this market multifold? That really is the centerpiece of our discussion today. So before we really get on, I would request each of the panelists to kindly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the area that you work in for the benefit of the audience. We'll start with Mr. Dalmia.
I'm V.N. Dalmia, Chairman of Dalmia Continental and President of the Indian Olive Association. My company launched Leonardo Olive Oil 10 years ago and promoted the use of olive oil for Indian cuisine. We also launched Hudson Canola Oil. We were the first to launch canola oil in India. Leonardo is now an umbrella brand with many food products. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kajal Bhatia. I'm a natural health and wellness expert. The diseases of the body is what I deal with. And my objective is to make sure that people have the right foods which help them reverse their conditions. I do live cooking demos, experiential workshops, retail walking tours, so that people are more aware of whatever is available in the market in terms of health as we say it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mickey Mehta. I'm in business of healing people, bringing smiles on their face, making lives worth living. I'm a life coach, a philosopher. I do a lot of work online also. So you can find me online. And otherwise, if you shut your eyes and imagine, I'll be there. You can find me there too. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nazneen Hussain. I'm the Director of Freedom Lifestyle and Management. The biggest mantra at Freedom we follow is as the food, so the mind, as the mind, so the man. So Brahma is what we follow, and I think this forum is perfect for that. And I'm also the Secretary of the Indian Dietetic Association. We believe in holistic life and fitness. Thank you.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Aditya Bagri, and I'm from Bagri's India Limited. We're a health foods FMCG which specializes in breakfast cereals and other health foods which are on the genuinely healthy and the natural platform. We are one of the key players in oats. We are the leading brand in muesli. We have some very exclusive health products which like Oat Bran and Wheat Bran. We've recently introduced green tea into the market and a very innovative range of oat-based products called Oats for India. And as a business, we've had a lineage of food innovation as well as of genuinely healthy products. And that's what we're here to discuss, I guess.
So, as you can see, we have a pretty interesting panel and some very, very interesting backgrounds. I, of course, have a very boring introduction as compared to most of them. I run Godrej Nature's Basket, which is essentially a premium gourmet retailer. We are also pretty large in the space of selling health foods. But as I said, we are a niche retailer with presence only in metros and urban catchments in general. So that's really about me. To throw the discussion open, gentlemen and ladies, so where do you think is the health market currently? I mean, a lot is said about health. A lot of people are talking about it. We read about it in newspapers. We see it on television. But do you really think the health market is booming in India at this stage? Where do you think? What do you think? Opening comments from all of you, please.
Mohit, I think it's at the beginning stage. So we are at the start of the product life cycle. So if we're thinking about the product life cycle going in the usual way, I would think that we're in the high growth stage. But we're nowhere near the kind of awareness we need to have.
So, the health foods market, and we were discussing this earlier as well, it's always been prevalent in India. So we've always had a lot of traditionally healthy foods. But somewhere down the past few years, it sort of lost steam, and now it's been fed back by foreign trends and and a whole new generation coming into the economy, and it's growing for sure. I'm not sure if it's at that booming stage yet. I believe in the future is again going to be very key to the health market, and it is potentially going to boom because of the lifestyle changes, what we see around us, and even the software aspect. Suddenly, people are looking fitter on screen, people are looking fitter in papers, people are talking about being fit. The whole paradigm has changed. So that's something which will.
I'd just like to add that, looking at yourself and Mickey, I'm kind of feeling extremely unfit right now. But jokes apart, so what I hear you guys saying is that the market is not really booming. It's kind of beginning to grow. There is growing awareness, but it's not really there, is what I hear you saying. Mickey, you'd like to add something?
Sorry, ladies first.
Thank you. I believe that it's at a very nascent stage, but I must say surely that the number of people who come across now for health advice, it's no longer restricted to post 30. It cuts across all ages, shapes and sizes. So everybody definitely wants to be healthy now. It's one of the priorities on most people's lives.
The father of medicine, Hippocrates, said that thy food be thy medicine. And, food should heal you, not kill you. So, it is said that we don't die of foods that we eat, but we die because we don't eat certain foods. So we ought to be eating very healthy foods. And to India, healthy foods is it's no new news. Health foods may be new news, but healthy foods, Indians have been eating healthy foods. Your simple dal, bhat, shaak, chapati, salad, dahi, and whatever you eat is so healthy. Our snacks have been so healthy. Our fruits, salads, our whole system of eating has been so healthy. But yes, we've forgotten that. We need to expand our awareness. We need to be more conscious of ourselves. Of course, all that is packaged is not necessarily healthy. All that is processed is also not necessarily healthy. You must see food that is alive, as wholesome as possible, as natural as possible, and consume it as soon as possible.
I'd also like to second that because I think there's been a growing, suddenly now in the last 1 year, we have almost 9 channels which cover food exclusively. And people are eating, but are they eating healthy? And with that, we know India is now the diabetic capital, and so there is a greater need for us to kind of begin with this health food industry, and I think it's just still taking toddler steps. So we have a long way to go.
In fact, I read somewhere that health foods constitute only about 7 or 8% of the overall foods market in India, as compared to, let's say, 27% in some of the other developed countries. So we are, let's say, 3 times behind, or we have 3 times to grow to meet up with some of the other countries in the world. Now,
Health is concerned, but the entire integrated holistic effect of health has to start at the primary level. Very important.
Food is so primary that there is a completely new science called nutrigenomics, which says that your food can change the expression of your genes. So if you begin to eat very healthy, you can get healed. Your body can build up a new memory pattern. It can erase the old memory pattern over a year or so, and you can switch on the good genes and switch off the bad genes. So food is so fundamental to life that food literally transforms you, it influences your thought process, your behavior, your attitude. So you must do sensible eating and sensible supplementation.
Can I add to that? So, in my opinion, the prevention of lifestyle diseases, which actually is what we are majorly suffering from, is a component of school education, primary education. And our educational system lacks majorly to that extent because our kids are not educated about what is leading to lifestyle diseases, what foods are healthy, what should be consumed, what should not be consumed. So in fact, I had suggested to the health minister that this should be made a component of primary education. And that, I think, is what we need to do.
Absolutely. So seconding what Mr. Dalmia and Kajal said, that one is that the education aspect is very important. The other difference, and when we talk about exponential growth, the difference is really going to come when we not just look at health as something that's preventive. So something that if you look at, the stereotypical description of an Indian male in any of the TVCs over the past 20 years, it's always been someone who's struggling to get fit. But get into the more aspirational zone, which is happening now, and look at lifestyle and a more holistic approach to lifestyle, that this is something that you need to eat on a regular basis. So that's really what's driven the exponential growth in some of the western parts of the world, along with the along with the education bit. The other bit's been that when we talk about the growth of packaged health foods in India, we must be cognizant of the fact that packaged foods by themselves are also very low in proportion to what's consumed in the West. So for health foods to grow, the packaged foods must grow first. But there are very strong trends to indicate that that's likely to happen because we are getting busier every day. We are, short of time. We do need to have alternatives to, food that's cooked at home. But within that, the approach still is top-down. So far what we're taking is a healthy food in the West and we're putting it top-down into India. So the larger question is to be successful, and if you look at case studies, you have to Indianize your products to actually meet the requirements of the Indian consumer, rather than trying to feed something which is popular in the West, which is built on that lifestyle, and then you feed it top-down to the Indian consumer.
Can I just add to Aditya? I just wanted to say that culture-specific, regional is very, very key to changing lifestyles. Asni.
Yeah, and also that, products of whatever few toddler, for the 9% market that we have, products are available, but still people don't know. People are still confused. Should I choose? Shouldn't I choose? Will it help? Won't it help? So I think we as an industry in every different segment need to emphasize on why and how can this product get converted into your kitchen. So I think this conversion is a...
Maybe we will just come back to this point. So just hold your point. I'm going to request Mr. Dalmia at this stage to take us through a study which he would like to share with all of us here, and then we will come back to this point.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I need your focused attention for 10 minutes as I intend to cover a lot of ground. My points, even though they pertain to oil, are generally applicable to all health foods. So the first issue is, why do we even talk about healthy oil or health foods? Well, the statistics are alarming. India is number one in cardiac patients in the world. 10% of our population is affected. The US and Europe are a distant number two, and China is number three. Now, heart disease is going to be the single greatest killer in India by 2015. And already in 2010, we had 100 million plus affected by heart disease, with over 40% of urban Indians suffering from high lipid levels, cholesterol and triglycerides. Then we also hold the gold medal for hypertension. We are number one in the world for high blood pressure, with 140 million people affected. And we lose the number one spot in diabetes to China. We're the number two diabetic capital of the world. So clearly, there is a need to talk about health, health foods, healthy oil. Why are we so ill? Firstly, we don't work in the fields anymore. We don't do manual labor anymore, so there have been big lifestyle changes. We've been historically consuming hydrogenated vegetable oils with a lot of trans fatty acids. We've also been consuming high saturated fat oils. This was okay when we did a lot of physical and manual labor, but now that we don't, it isn't. Then when we switched to what we called healthy oils, we switched to high polyunsaturated fat oils, which had very high amounts of omega-6. I'll elaborate on this later. Then we're all very fond of our fried food and desserts. And there is a general lack of awareness, as the panel was just discussing. Now, just very, very briefly, three types of fat. Monounsaturated fat or MUFA, broadly speaking, good. Saturated fatty acids need to be restricted because in excess, bad. So mono good, saturated bad, polyunsaturated fatty acids, the third type, or PUFA, in excess bad. Now, canola and olive oils, these have the optimum combination of these three types of fat. Now, this is technical, and I will not take you through it, but it's that saturated fat is solid at room temperature. Monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat is liquid at room temperature. And these are quotes from the American Heart Association which tell us why these types of fats are healthy. Now, please just look at this table of the comparison of fats and oils. Let's just look at the first two columns to start with, just saturated fat and MUFA. So if you look at olive oil, it has 15% and MUFA of 75. If you look at canola, it has only 8% saturated fat and 64% of MUFA. And then there are some other oils which are not so bad. I would call groundnut oil a high MUFA oil because it has 54. I won't deal with mustard oil because it has a very high percentage of erucic acid, and in the West, they consider this not to be healthy. And in fact, it's banned for edible use in Europe and North America. But if you look at the saturated fat content of some of our traditional oils, ghee is 66%. Then coconut oil, 92%. So clearly, historically, we've been consuming oils that are low in MUFA and high in saturated fat. Now, last point, we come to the third type of fat, PUFA, which can be split up into omega-3 and omega-6. Now, omega-3 is good, no doubt about it, and the more you get of it, the better. Omega-6 in excess is not good. And if you look at the oils that middle-class Indians switched to when they switched out of ghee and high saturated fat oils, let's look at sunflower oil. Sunflower oil, 61% omega-6. Then safflower oil or curdy oil, 76% omega-6, and so on and so on. Now, how do we Indians use oil? We don't use oil to flavor, as they do in the West. We don't sprinkle it on top after the cooking is done. What we do is first pour the oil into the pan. We heat the oil, and then we throw in the rest of the ingredients, whether they're vegetables or meat or whatever. We use it for cooking, not flavoring. And typically, our cooking is high heat cooking, frying. We don't like oils that have a strong taste or flavor because it changes the taste of our cuisine. Broadly speaking, we prefer oils that are neutral in flavor and aroma. Also, because we have high heat cooking, we need oils that have high smoking points. And as you can see, it's 250 with mustard, 242 with canola, 238 with olive pomace, then safflower, soya bean, and so on. Olive oil is 220, extra virgin olive oil is 180. Ghee is not very high, it's 177. So there was a study in Delhi by the Diabetes Foundation of India and the National Diabetes, Obesity and Cholesterol Foundation. It was a very interesting study. This is a visual of their results, but more clearly, the study was done over a period of 5 years with each participant trying out different oils for 6 months. The first group had olive pomace oil, second group had canola oil, third group had refined seed oils, sunflower, safflower, low MUFA oils. And this was the result. Waist circumference, you can see, first two groups down. Insulin resistance, first two groups down, third group neutral. Lipids and triglycerides, first two groups down, which means both olive oil and canola oil. Liver fat also down, and fasting glucose level also down. So here we're talking about helpful in diabetes, helpful in lipids and triglycerides, and helpful in liver fat and other things also. A very, very interesting Spanish study, now currently in progress with about 7,500 participants, period of study over 5 years, in which they had 3 groups. Group 1 on a low-fat diet, Group 2 on a Mediterranean diet with nuts, which means vegetables, a little bit of meat, lots of olive oil, and red wine. And Group 3, unrestricted calorie Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil. Conclusion was that Groups 2 and 3 showed a 30% reduction in risk of heart disease, which basically meant that the Mediterranean diet with nuts and with extra virgin olive oil was more effective than the low-fat diet. It was blasting some myths. The interesting part was that all the participants were allowed unrestricted consumption of red wine. So coming now to consumer trends in India, basically following the Western pattern. In the West, they started with animal fat, and then they moved to refined seed oils like sunflower and safflower, and then they moved to the high mufa oils. In India, we had ghee and then vanaspati, and then we moved to the refined seed oils, and we are also now moving towards the high mufa oils. Canola oil, surprisingly, has been adopted increasingly in the West. You can see that many of the QSRs and restaurant chains and even places like Disney have adopted canola oil as the preferred cooking medium. This is how olive oil has grown in the last 10 years from 1,000 tons to 12,000 tons. Canola oil is smaller, and it was introduced later in India. So starting with about 100 tons in 2009, now it's at about 3,000 tons. Groundnut oil, which is our own local domestic production, and I consider groundnut oil a healthy oil also. I also consider rice bran oil healthy oil, not because it has high mufa, it doesn't, but it has something called oryzanol, which is a powerful antioxidant that helps to reduce cholesterol. Groundnut oil is way bigger than any of the other oils we're talking about. It's at 1.5 million tons, but it's not growing. It's stable or in decline. And that is strange to me, and the reason I think that is so is that it is not promoted on a health platform. It's just a normal commodity. Our brands are Leonardo Olive Oil, 2003, it's the market leader. Hudson Canola Oil, launched in 2007. It was the first Indian brand of canola oil. And we've just launched a rice bran oil, olive oil blend. 70% olive oil and, rice bran oil and 30% olive oil. So you get the best of both. It improves the fat content, and plus you get the oryzanol. Now, I've been talking about healthy oils and high mufa oils. And so I'm obviously not wearing my hat, the hat of the president of the Indian Olive Association. I'm just speaking on behalf of my company today. But the points I'm making about challenges and future trends apply to all health foods in general. First, of course, is price resistance, because the consumer balks at paying a higher price, even though you might tell him that this is going to, in the long run, perhaps prevent an expensive bypass surgery. So don't quibble about 200 rupees more. But there is price resistance to healthy foods. Then, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India is a big challenge, because many of our trade standards are prehistoric and not aligned with international standards. And canola oil, for example, doesn't even have a standard. And so there's going to be trouble with getting canola oil into the country. Then I always say that any healthy food, if it's imported, has to have an application to an Indian household. You have to make Indians understand that they can use this product with their everyday meals and that it has to be suitable for household food. That is the only way you get volumes, and also you affect the general health of the population. For that, we need to create awareness. Also, of course, there is the issue of products that are bottled in India, imported from abroad, and many of them sell at costs that are below our cost. So I leave you to form your own conclusions about that. Where will we go in the future? In my opinion, prices will fall. There will be major innovations. There'll be blends of oil, like our rice bran oil and olive oil. There'll be blends of oil that will be healthy oils. Olive oil will continue to grow at 30%. I think the canola oil category will explode, and it'll become a very big player in the edible oil space. Canola blends will emerge, and I think the rural market will open up. Now, especially with, as everybody probably knows, Rajasthan is planting olive trees, and there was a dip. It disappeared, kind of disappeared. It was started by the BJP government, and then there was a Congress government for 5 years, and the olive project disappeared. Now there's a BJP government again, and it's going to be revived. I think that Punjab and Rajasthan and others will open up a huge rural market. Finally, what do retailers need to do in order to help the health food and healthy edible oil categories? These categories need nurturing and special treatment. So yes, it is the job of the producers, it is the job of the sellers to do the education, but we need help from retailers. We need to educate the consumer. We need to arrange sessions with nutritionists at the point of sale, at the store. We need this to be included in bundles at the store and in advertisements. Canola is a nascent category. It needs a little more attention than olive oil, which has grown. And we need retailers to be realistic, because these categories cannot be treated like other major FMCG categories, where promotion and education is left to the individual brands. And if we try to do awareness and educational activities, then of course we have to pay major fees to retailers. Retailers also demand very high, exorbitant margins from these categories, very, very high. Sometimes impractical, making the product impractical to sell in modern trade. It's actually killing the golden goose in some respects, because it's a short-term view. Thank you, Mohit. I think I exceeded slightly.
Thank you very much. Okay, your presentation came at a fairly interesting stage. I think you spoke about a lot of concepts which many of us were not clear about. But even today, we find several brands that make claims on health. Just if you were to take the example of oils, there are just so many brands that talk about zero cholesterol. There are so many other different categories of products which claim health benefits. Do you think there is a bit of, does the consumer really believe all these claims? Do you think all these claims are actually true? And do you think these brands are actually making these claims responsibly?
No, they're not making those claims responsibly. And the Advertising Standards Council of India is not a very effective body. So yes, claims are misleading, and they have to be scrutinized. We need the help of nutritionists here to educate people about what is really healthy and what is not healthy.
These two lovely ladies on my sides, and we were just discussing, and I brought it up, that our Indian Desi cow's ghee, okay, it is so healthy as opposed to any other oil, but yes, you don't have to drink it. You have to consume maximum of 8 to 10 grams. And especially in your chapatis, please don't get scared of it. Don't have dry chapatis, don't get scared. Put ghee in your chapatis, Desi cow's ghee, and your chapati will be digested better. It will absorb nutrients of all the food better. It will give you
See
all
so
the-
many smiling faces here. We all love him, right?
it will improve your immunity. It will give you the strength. It will bind away toxins and flush them out. And trust me, it is good. There are researches to show that how consumption of desi cow's ghee is good. So guys, don't get mad counting calories. Stop counting, start living.
So what you're saying is that there's a lot of misinformation out there because we are being also made to believe that ghee is bad.
No. 8 to 10 grams. I'm just saying that please, you don't have to drink it. It shouldn't be a cola. It should be something to quench your thirst with. You know, ghee.
You're saying don't cook in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Consume. And I truly appreciate what Mr. Dalmia said, that the Indian Advertising Council is not, enforcement is not that strong. And yes, most of the big companies, multinationals, what they do, they have only isolated, fragmented research and studies, and they only put that up. They don't have holistic research. So if somebody were to say that consuming liquor is bad for liver, they will leave that out and only print that it is good for the heart. Do you understand? If somebody would say that consuming chocolates give you diabetes, but they will leave that out and they will say, okay, it's a good mood elevator. So all the researches are done with vested interest. All the printing of those researches incorporated in the labels are also done with vested interest. So consumers shouldn't, get carried away.
I think what Mickey's raised is a very valid point, and from Mr. Dalmia's suggestion also, there are plenty of products out there, and the chocolates and ghee and liquor, for example, it's common knowledge that it's not healthy. So as consumers, we might not be as misled because there's education going in those spheres. But the processed food space is actually such a dangerous space to operate in because there are so many of those products which are actually perceived healthy but are actually unhealthy. And so many of those, right from your whole grain noodles to your multigrain attas, and then you've got even products, for example, like your malt-based energy drinks. If you look at the top 3 ingredients there, it's sugar, it's sugar, malt, flour, and then whole milk powder, which is again isolated, so it's not actually complete milk. And that's sold to kids as health products. And then we've got cornflakes also, which, as breakfast cereal manufacturers, we know that cornflakes is not really healthy. So again, selling purely on health perception.
Aditya, I would like to say that you definitely touched the point. I definitely believe that there are many healthy products out there, but all those healthy products might not have all healthy ingredients. For instance, in Bagris, I believe that they have oats. And a lot of people at the consumer level, they do make those oats at home. But then they start adding sugar. They add a lot of oil in it. So is that product actually healthy? That's the essence of it, the total product. What is the ingredient list in it? And I would like to also correct Mickey. Cow's ghee, in Ayurveda, it was a medicated version and a medicated dosage, but nothing more. Yes, absolutely. So the dosage. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Kajal's point is very valid that consumers generally also add in stuff which they don't actually know is unhealthy or just to, get that taste value and it goes in. Ghee, for example, has been something which has been traditionally used for a very long time, and so has sugar. But, from a brand's perspective, it's very important to see how you market those things out. Like, is it the right product to sell to diabetics if you have cookies, made with so many artificial sweeteners which are so controversial, and then you label them as oat cookies, but you have only 5% oats inside? That's something that you're marketing as a brand. So the consumer generally will not add anything but consume that. So, when I introduced myself as a part of Bagris, we're a health foods FMCG, not an FMCG health foods. So one of the principles which is very strong in Bagris is that we have to be 100% natural. We have to be on the honest health platform, which is such that, you should not be able to find an unhealthy ingredient in our products. It should be genuinely healthy. And unless and until the consumer gets some value out of it, we will not, market that product under our brand. But that's, again, a very niche phenomenon. So there are plenty of such good products out there in the market which don't reach haven't reached a mass appeal yet.
I think also one typical product is also brown rice, which is now emerging. But initially to know that we always use brown rice and people used wholer rice and fuller rice. But now I think the new forms of rice which have come, which is not ideally basmati rice, and when patients and clients come and they want healthy solutions to eat, and they're very, very unhappy if you remove the rice off. So if you're giving them just normal brown rice, which they can incorporate in the everyday food, and like how Mr. Dalmia spoke about rice bran and the oryzanol in it, so it still has benefits. So I think there is a need right now to have foods which may have the correct blend and still have nutritional information, be priced right, and the conversion in the kitchen is possible, and how applicable it is.
Yeah, you want to say
Yeah, I would just like to highlight, of course, my panelists, the question of non-vegetarian food also, the safety standards in which it is kept. I mean, it's very high in saturated fat and cholesterol, we all know. But how is it helping in a health format to a lot of people? So, Mickey, do you have to add to that?
As a promoter of health, I've been a vegetarian for 12 years. I've been a vegan for 4 years thereafter. And in the current state of my life and my career, profession, what I'm doing is experimenting with foods. But I do endorse vegetarian way of life, which is very, very good. Coming to the other point, that we as humans should eat like humans. When we start consuming food with lust like animals, that is where the problems start.
Very true.
So we must have food with great reverence, grace, gratitude. And if these elements are there in your food eating habits, slowly, relaxed, calm, composure, the food will reveal the secrets of nutrients to you. They will unfold the best to you. And literally, you must romance your eating, romance your exercise. So once again, like a human, not like an animal.
So Mickey uses some fantastic phrases actually. But I just want to come back to a point that Aditya kind of touched upon, and which was, he spoke about the need for corporates to be responsible in the way they, put out information on packs right now. That's a point that you just touched upon. And obviously what I also heard from many of you was that there's a lot of misinformation out there. You mentioned that cornflakes are not healthy, somebody mentioned that some other products, malted beverages you mentioned are not healthy, etc.
Plant-based oils,
Absolutely.
which are always free of cholesterol.
Right. Yeah. Oils which carry, no zero cholesterol or no cholesterol, and all oils actually have zero cholesterol. That's correct, because it's all plant-based. What I also see being articulated in some sense is a need for regulation on what is put on the pack, right? And that's something which, possibly the government or the FSSAI need to be possibly a lot more cognizant of, and drive that through the industry, through their regulations. That's what I kind of hear some of you saying, though it was not articulated like this, but. So that was one point. The other point which I kind of got from you, Nazneen, you mentioned somewhere in your articulation that it has to be priced right. Products have to be priced right. And I think that's a pretty important point, because if you look at it, if you were to look at how to make health foods grow, one of the one of the points which would be right up there would be the fact that it needs to be affordable. Anything that is affordable would possibly get a lot more mass distributed and would therefore get a lot more volume. In India, it's the other way around. Health foods are starting off as expensive products. So do you think we are on the right ladder, or do you think we are on the wrong ladder? And where are we going wrong? What should we be doing?
I think this should be understood in the perspective of doing business in a karmic way. Not to make money, but to earn money. And the way to earn money is by the way of education, by the way of making products available down the line in huge volumes at very low margins, so that maximum people can partake in the whole revolution of wellness. That is very important.
Fortunately, India is not even it's not even a country where these products did not exist. We are so familiar with millets, we are so familiar with so many health foods actually.
I think we must make products available with bare minimum margins, so that you can sell huge volumes and let maximum people enjoy the benefits of it.
Yes. I agree too that I think if products are placed right, as of now, all health products are for a segmented niche population. And even though a common man wants to buy it, but the price of it is so high that he may ape to buy it, but at the end of it, he just lands up buying something which is not so correctly priced. So I think the affordability is one big, one of the biggest factors.
It's a challenge because um, if it's left to the entrepreneur to create awareness, spread education, then mega bucks have to be spent on that. Where does that come from? So we're actually doing a public service by creating that awareness and spreading that education. But if you have very small margins, wafer thin, margins, can't afford to do that. I mean, that is why I was saying the government has a role to play. Ministry of Education, in schools, prevention of lifestyle diseases, what is healthy. That starts to happen, yes.
I take a different point of view here, that it's okay if very few people are getting the benefit initially of healthy foods. I'm glad that the change has been initiated and now it's being demanded by a lot many. Eventually it will percolate down to the masses anyways, because that's how the order is, from the top to the bottom, and if that's the way, so be it.
I think, Mr. Dalmia touched upon a very important point. And the point was of the greater challenge. So, is the greater challenge today the fact that healthy foods are priced high? Or is the challenge that people don't know what are healthy foods? So I think the larger challenge, and at least there's a larger consensus around it, is that a lot of people still don't know what constitutes to be healthy. And the education around it would require investment. But also down the line, like every product has a life cycle. So we've seen that, the margins and everything else eventually does have to come down for it to be adopted. And most products, oats, for example, for us reach an inflection point where, we could streamline the supply chain a bit. And that's the other flip side. So most of the healthy foods, unless and until you're deriving it out of Indian-based ingredients, are all sourced from outside. So there's a ceiling beyond which you can't go because, the raw materials which you bring in are priced at a certain level unless you are willing to compromise on quality, which again is not good. So there's a balance which as brands we need to play, and we need to be conscious that it should not be something that people can't afford for a very long time. Like it has to eventually be something that's made available.
Like I saw with the organic foods, initially there were very few players and now there are so many. So I guess the economies of scale is also coming down where people are being able to afford even organic foods. Not largely at homes as a staple, but everybody prefers that.
Right. Kajal, you just mentioned organic foods, and that brings me to another question. That are there many kinds of health foods? Or there only just one kind of health foods? Because if you just go back on the conversations that some of you have had, there's just so many different aspects to it. So what are the different kinds of health foods, and where do you think is the larger market for India?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Mohit, because that's completely my job to educate people on that. For me, it's just one thing: health is wholesome and nothing else. So I don't look at categories of health. It just has to be wholesome and natural.
Anything that has color, texture, fragrance, taste, anything that calls you, anything that attracts you spiritually is healthy. So if food attracts you in its most wholesome state, well, please go ahead and consume it.
I think it's the overall organoleptic thing. It's the way you see it, the way you smell it, the first bite when a client or a patient takes, and what is the mouthfeel of the product? How does it smell? How does it feel? And having said that, there is another philosophy which goes that there is just 2 inches of muscle which controls the world, either by the way you speak or the way you taste. So a lot of philosophy revolves around the taste of the food, and I think it's a huge challenge on the industry. Can we make healthy foods tasty? Are health foods attractive? What is the deciding factor? What is that moment of choice when a person would take a healthy food versus a non-healthy food? So it's a lot of mindful eating where our consumers need to be educated on that level on, where should we choose.
While you mentioned that, and all of you said the same thing in some sense, that food that is good, food that, you like, it smells good, it looks good, and that you feel like eating, you mentioned organoleptics, etc. So is that the only kind? Could there be food, so for example, there could be functional needs. So for instance, a person who has a particular heart condition, he could be eating particular kinds of food, even if he doesn't like the look and feel of it. So could there be other kinds of foods for which there's possibly a market? Mr. Dalmia mentioned that, India is the capital of coronary heart disease in India, in the world. So could there be, specific foods for a particular medical condition, for instance?
Hasni, would like to answer that first?
Yeah, today we're gaining a lot of popularity on functional foods. Oats being one of the biggest functional foods. We're also now comprehending on brown rice because it not only helps people control their weight, but also a lot of research has shown that people who consume brown rice, their choices of picking up more fattier foods decreases. So there seems to be somewhere some kind of a neurochemical modulator wherein the moment a person starts eating a wholesome, fuller brown rice, this need to choose on to wrong foods decreases. Also, it creates kind of a satiety feeling, so it's a good functional food. Also, we have other functional foods like olives and olive oil. Also, methi seeds and haldi and curcumin today. A lot of the whole industry works around curcumin, and it's one of the most well-known functional foods. So, tulsi, basil, a lot of traditional foods also are now coming into the nutraceutical market, and they've been helping a lot.
Fruits heal you, vegetables cleanse you, dry fruits and nuts fortify you. So have lots of them as the first option. Second option, packeted health foods. First option, fresh foods. Very important.
I second that completely. Fresh, minimally processed, as natural as possible, grown under the rays of the sun. Coming back to your question about whether a clinically deficient person, yes, in that situation, healthy foods also form a different category in terms of maybe vitamin D fortified foods, which is a rampant epidemic I see in every patient actually now. And such fortified foods, nutraceuticals, isolated foods, maybe protein supplements in some cases, that is key. Yeah.
I think balance is very important. So I think a little bit of awareness is necessary. So a balanced diet which comprises protein, carbohydrates, fiber, and vitamins. And balanced fat composition. Small amount of saturated fat, large amount of monounsaturated fat, and small amounts of polyunsaturated fat. I mean, for example, what kind of oil do I use at home? Please comment on this, ladies. One day olive oil, one day canola oil, one day olive oil, and then one day ghee.
I think
good
all the
ratio.
panelists have given such articulate and such ideal descriptions to what healthy food should comprise of. So I'll just give a very simple understanding of ours from a manufacturer's perspective. So health foods actually, there's a category which is better for you, which is the high fiber digestives, or something which is or the atta noodles or the multigrain noodles, which is essentially not healthy foods but is slightly perceived as slightly better. Then there's a category of fortified foods, which is basically with all the vitamin D or all the supplements added to it. And then there's the food that we've been talking about, which is the good for you food, which is generally good for you. And to answer Mohit's question on the functionality side, yes, there's a need now, and there's a growing trend towards getting more functional foods. So these might be crossovers between something that's almost almost pharmaceutical as well as functional foods. So right from the protein supplements to something less pharmaceutical would be the need for gluten-free food, because currently we are finding a lot more people gluten allergic. And Mr. Dalmia touched upon the heart health point, and that's something that we've worked very closely as a brand, and we've created this new innovation called Oats for India. So the whole idea is that from a health point of view, you need to have 70 grams of oats a day to make a difference to your diet. But you won't get that out of a bowl of porridge. Plus, it's really boring to consume. So we've created a whole range of oat staples, and oats suji, and oats rice, and oats poha, and oats atta, which is 100% oats. But you can add it in a very simple way to your diet, as as in your chapatis, in your suji dishes, in your poha. But the idea is to get that functional benefit in without actually creating a tailor-made food which is not easy to consume. So
Wouldn't you agree, ladies, that the Indian diet is excessive in carbohydrates, rich in carbohydrates? We eat too much bread, too much roti, too much naan, too much carbohydrates, and that vegetarians are deficient in protein? Yes. I mean, you have vegetarian sources of protein. I'm not promoting non-vegetarianism.
It
but
is
I'm
a
just saying-
conscious effort, like you said, it is a conscious effort for a vegetarian to consume those protein foods. And I think somewhere, sticking on to the functional food topic, there has been a lot of innovation also in the industry, like Amul has launched their prebiotic, probiotic curds, and so has Nestle. And today we have also, Nestle has the Pro Heart milk, which is also helping in reducing cholesterol. So I think those are good innovations. The entire probiotic range. So has a lot of other FMCGs who have given more healthier options like the bran options and the muesli options and breakfast options. I think some of them in the functional food category, we have seen a lot of innovation.
Coming back to your question about vegetarians and protein. In my experience, I have seen that the symptoms of protein deficiency, which is usually related to bone loss or mass or etc., I have seen both vegetarians and non-vegetarians have similar symptoms of protein deficiency. So I think there is something beyond that, and I would pin it down on processed foods again. Why we are not getting the right form of protein that we need, because it's not bioabsorbable by the body. It's made in such a way.
I would say that for a vegetarian person, they have to really work hard to choose the correct combinations, because cereals are deficient in some amino acids and so are pulses. So combining both or combining it with some kind of a milk product so that the bioavailability of the protein goes up high, I think that is a concern, and we need to work around those aspects. Also, not to forget calcium and vitamin D, which are now growing health concerns of today.
On one hand, if we are discussing about bioavailability of the protein that we consume, most important factor on that would be challenging your body, exercising your body, stretching, contracting, using gravity as a force, using the force of acceleration, deceleration, dimensions. Exercise and challenge your body to the point that the body becomes capable of absorbing and digesting all that you eat. It's very, very important. So it's only when you exercise your body well, it's only when you breathe well, you will be able to digest the best of the food well, not otherwise.
Fantastic. I think that's a fantastic point. Unfortunately, I'll have to cut you guys short. We are completely out of time. So thank you very much. In case there are any quick questions from the audience.
Hi, my first question is for Mr. Dalmia. Can you share with us your experiences and the tools that you have used while promoting olive oil? That, as you have mentioned, you entered the industry while it was quite nascent. And the second question is for everyone. Are there any standards for health food products? Like we have standards for organically produced products. So do we have something similar for health products? Thank you.
I'll take it offline. It's a marketing question, not a health question. So after the thing, I'll chat with her.
My question is both to Mr. Dalmia and Mr. Bagri. A lot of your discussion around the promotion, the marketing of health foods seems to revolve around, the health benefits of those products, and almost asks to evoke your consumers, their sense of responsibility towards themselves as the starting point towards your marketing thinking. However, being from the food service industry, I know that a promise of great taste and great experience drives people to consuming things more than this other narrative that you're talking about. So is there some sort of discontinuity between if something is healthy, it cannot be tasty? Is there some sort of a barrier in consumers' mind that you're not able to overcome and therefore you don't choose that route? Or is it lack of innovation that something which is genuinely healthy cannot go down as tasty as well? What is holding this explosion from happening?
Great. That's a wonderful question, and it's something that we were discussing earlier as well. The health taste paradigm, is it mutually exclusive? Is it not? And our take as manufacturers is that it's not mutually exclusive. Something healthy is not something that's necessarily not tasty, but it's a challenge to actually develop tasty products without actually adding anything that's unhealthy into it. So the need for innovation is a lot more. For example, I believe our mueslis would not sell if they weren't tasty, if consumers did not accept the taste. So the taste, because, like Mickey said, that the first touch point, and I think that was elaborated by Nazneen as well, that the first touch point is the taste. So it has to feed your senses. But given that, should you actually, put in something which is dodgy in your product? That really is the question. For example, the whole concept of Oats for India and the range revolved around our research that lots of consumers did not like consuming oats as porridge because they found it bland, they didn't find it tasty. So we had to find ways of incorporating such a wonderful grain in their diet without altering tastes, without altering habits, and giving them that freedom to go ahead and try and make something tasty with something that's essentially very healthy.
Sir, just a line of wisdom that good tastes in life are acquired and cultivated, sir.
I'd just like to add to what these gentlemen have said. If you look at India historically and the way it's evolved, look at the way we have cooked. Look at the kind of cooking mediums that we've used. I mean, we've used oils that have a high saturated fat content or a high PUFA content. Look at the way we cook. We kind of fry, deep fry, etc. And obviously all that lends a certain taste to our food. So historically we have consumed food which is possibly not the healthiest. Today now we are being told that no, you have to consume oils which are different. You have to cook differently, right? And you have to consume ingredients which are possibly low calorie, low fat, etc., etc. I think the whole paradigm is changing, and therefore in our minds as consumers we believe, oh, health food is not tasty. But can it be made tasty? I definitely think it can be made tasty. It's a question of more India-centric innovation that needs to happen. So possibly, I think you touched upon the answer yourself, that is there need for a greater range or a greater diversity of products? Yes, there is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohit and the panelists. It was an interesting discussion. With this, we come to the end of today's session.